Imagine trying to squeeze a 300-pound camel through the eye of a sewing needle. Absolutely impossible, right? That's exactly what Jesus said about wealthy people entering heaven. But what if everything you've been taught about this famous Bible verse is completely wrong? Let's talk about one of the most radical statements ever attributed to Jesus of Nazareth. In the Gospel of Mark, chapter 10, verse 25, Jesus delivers this stunning proclamation. It is easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than for a rich person to enter the kingdom of God. Just picture that for a moment. The average Middle Eastern dromedary camel stands over 2 meters tall and weighs between 300 and 600 kilograms. Meanwhile, archaeological discoveries from Jesus' time reveal sewing needles with eyes measuring just 3 millimeters wide and 7 millimeters long. Unless you possess the gravitational power of a neutron star to compress matter itself, what Jesus describes is physically impossible. And that's precisely his point. This saying echoes through centuries of religious texts and literature. It appears in Matthew and Luke's Gospels, reverberates through the Quran, and even surfaces in Shakespeare's works. But here's where things get fascinating. 2 competing theories have emerged that claim to reveal hidden meanings behind this impossible proverb. The first theory suggests a massive translation error. What if Jesus never mentioned a camel at all? Proponents of this view argue the original Greek word kamelos, meaning rope or cable, was mistakenly copied as kamelos, meaning camel. Just one single vowel difference in ancient Greek, eta versus iota, could have completely transformed the meaning. Ancient scribes made these kinds of errors constantly. We find evidence in Egyptian papyri where omega and omicron vowels were regularly confused because they sounded identical during the Roman period. Some early Christian authorities actually supported this interpretation. Cyril of Alexandria, writing in the 5th century, explicitly stated that Jesus meant not the living animal but the thick rope sailors used to tie their anchors. Modern supporters make compelling arguments. Using rope creates a more logical hyperbolic analogy than the seemingly random camel reference. If this specifically meant nautical rope, it would align perfectly with Jesus' frequent use of boat and fishing imagery throughout the Gospels. But here's where the theory collapses under scrutiny. Our earliest and most reliable biblical manuscripts all say camel, not cable. Scholars who reconstruct original texts always prioritize these ancient sources as they've undergone the least alteration through centuries of copying. The few later Byzantine manuscripts that say cable likely represent attempts to soften Jesus' radical statement rather than preserve original wording. Even more damning, Jewish rabbinical texts contain parallel idioms using elephants going through needles' eyes. This suggests Jesus was employing a common Jewish rhetorical device for describing impossibility, using the largest local land animal to make his point. In the Levant, that animal was the camel. In Mesopotamia, it was the elephant. The final nail in the coffin comes from Aramaic linguistic analysis. While some claim the Aramaic word gamla could mean both camel and rope during Jesus' time, this simply isn't true. The earliest reference to gamla meaning rope appears 1,000 years after Jesus in the work of Syriac linguist Hassan Babalur. He included it as a supplemental definition while citing Cyril of Alexandria, suggesting it was either extremely rare or his own interpretation influenced by the Greek confusion. No other Aramaic dictionary from Jesus' era or centuries afterward contains this dual meaning. Now let's examine the second theory that fundamentally changes Jesus' message. This one claims the eye of the needle wasn't a sewing needle at all. but a small pedestrian gate in Jerusalem's walls. According to this popular interpretation, while camels couldn't normally pass through this narrow gate, they could if they knelt down and had their baggage removed. Thus, the saying becomes a metaphor for rich people entering heaven by humbling themselves and shedding their worldly possessions. Sounds plausible, right? Except there's one enormous problem. Absolutely zero historical evidence supports this theory. Not a single ancient source, biblical, extra-biblical, Josephus, Dead Sea Scrolls, early Christian commentaries, or rabbinic writings, ever uses eye of a needle to refer to a Jerusalem gate. The complete absence from ancient records is deafening. So where did this widespread legend originate? Recent scholarship traces it to medieval times. We find Shakespeare referencing it in Richard II, evidence the legend circulated in 16th century England. Earlier still, 15th century European pilgrim John Poliner claimed to have seen the actual gate in Jerusalem. The trail leads back to 13th century theologian Thomas Aquinas, who attributed the idea to 11th century monk Anselm of Canterbury. This complete absence from ancient sources combined with sudden medieval popularity suggests one thing: a fabricated tradition that emerged nearly 1,000 years after Jesus. Why would medieval Christians create such a legend? Because it fundamentally softens Jesus' radical message. The original saying presents wealth as an insurmountable obstacle to salvation, something only divine intervention could overcome. The gate theory transforms it into a manageable process of humility and simplification. For centuries, people have tried to make Jesus' words more comfortable, more palatable. They've attempted to explain away the impossible with translation errors and architectural metaphors. But perhaps we need to sit with the discomfort of what Jesus actually said. Maybe the radical nature of his statement is exactly what we need to confront, a challenge that forces us to examine our relationship with wealth, privilege, and what truly constitutes salvation. Sometimes the hardest truths come in the most impossible packages. The question isn't whether a camel can fit through a needle's eye, but whether we're willing to confront the uncomfortable realities that make us question everything we think we know about wealth, righteousness, and what it truly means to enter the kingdom of heaven.